Tonight on Reporting Scotland, over 300 planned operations were cancelled in the last week, and there are warnings that more could be postponed as the flu outbreak continues. Police carry out a controlled explosion on a suspicious package found near Edinburgh Castle. Ruth Davidson says she doesn't want to face another constitutional referendum in her lifetime. The crew of a ship detained in Aberdeen for more than a year still hasn't been paid the wages owed to them.
A lot of people thought that once they went home, they would be coming home with money to pay bills, to pay loans and such like, and the money's not there.
And also in the programme, the beach in a barn. Scotland's beach volleyball squad have created their own training facility. One of Scotland's leading medical figures has warned that there may be a knock-on effect on waiting times for routine operations if the number of people with flu doesn't ease off. At least 340 planned procedures had to be postponed in hospitals across Scotland in the last week alone. Here's our health and social care correspondent, Shelley Joffrey.
My foot feels as if it's slipped with a razor blade along from my toes to my heel.
Sandra Stevenson from Airdrie suffers chronic pain. To manage it twice a year, she's supposed to get a spinal injection. Last year, both appointments were cancelled.
They don't have the space. They don't have the space. It's done over in theatre at Wishaw General at the day surgery. And I mean, it's the ward's full of people getting injections when I'm there. And they just don't have the space. They do care, it's not their fault.
Sandra's one of a growing number of patients who've waited far longer than the Scottish Government's referral to treatment target of 18 weeks. Professor Derek Bell has been tasked with reversing that trend, but he's concerned about the knock-on effect of flu and other winter pressures.
The winter that we've had this year is likely to have impact. We won't know for definite till the end of January when we actually see those figures, but I think we are likely to see some cancelled operations or cancelled procedures. The impact, the extent of that, I think, does depend on recovery. If you've only got 1 or 2 weeks of, if you like, high activity, not that that's good for patients, then and we recover quicker, the impact will be less. If the recovery is slower, the impact will be greater.
In the last week, health boards across Scotland have had to postpone some planned operations. 4 in Dumfries and Galloway, 5 in Forth Valley. In Lanarkshire, there were 12, in Fife, 41, and in the biggest health board areas, 130 in Lothian, and in Glasgow, 149. When Professor Bell was appointed, the Health Secretary said she expected waiting times to improve by the spring. That could now be in doubt.
What we should be doing is planning to improve, not setting false targets that we can't agree. So what we want to do is reverse the trend, because we do want patients to have timely procedures, timely operations.
The Scottish Government says it's working with Professor Bell's group and health boards to minimise the impact of the exceptional winter pressures. Shelley Joffrey, Reporting Scotland.
Unions are calling for all council workers to get a pay rise of at least £1,500. The 3 unions that represent most council staff have just lodged their pay claim. Our local government correspondent, Jamie McIver, is outside Glasgow City Chambers for us this evening. How is the claim being justified, Jamie?
Well, the unions would put a simple justification, Sally. They would say that this is about restoring the value of council workers' pay, which they say hasn't kept pace with inflation in recent years. What they're looking for is a rise worth 6.5% or £1,500, whichever is the greater. And that's significantly more than the level of the increase the Scottish Government has been hoping to give to public sector workers. Now, the unions argue that many council workers have seen the value of their pay decline through the years of austerity.
RPI is predicted to be 3.3%, so even a 3% increase would be lower than the current rate of inflation. You put that against the fact that over the last 8 years our members have had either 0 increases or below inflation increases. We have calculated our members have suffered a 15% real terms cut in their wages over the last 10 years.
But is a £1,500 increase, is that realistic?
Well, Sally, I think many in council chambers are going to feel personally sympathetic. The question is one of affordability. The council umbrella body COSLA didn't want to give us an interview today, but they did give us a statement, and they said that the pay rise that's agreed will have to be sustainable and affordable. And I think that gets to the heart of this issue. Councils have had tight budgets for several years, so a big pay rise for council workers, that implies councils would have to get more money from the Scottish Government, or they would have to find the money by making cuts and savings elsewhere. Now, the council unions, they're just the latest example. They're the second example within a week of a union arguing for a big pay rise for its members. Last week it was the turn of the teachers' union, the EIS. There is certainly a sense here that unions are becoming emboldened when it comes to asking for big pay rises to make up for what they see as the tough times through the years of austerity.
Jamie McIver in Glasgow for us tonight. Thank you very much. A man has been critically injured after an explosion at a row of shops in Clydebank. Police were called shortly before midnight last night. Reports said a cash machine at Premier Stores on Glasgow Road had been blown up. The 51-year-old man was found at the scene. He was taken to Queen Elizabeth University Hospital for treatment. Police said another man was seen running away from the area. Police in Edinburgh are investigating whether a suspicious package found in Princes Street Gardens yesterday evening was a bomb hoax. Disposal experts carried out a controlled explosion on the package last night. Lisa Summers reports.
In the shadow of Edinburgh Castle, a police cordon has remained in place all day. Streets in the west of the city and Princes Street Gardens remain closed as investigations continue. This was the scene yesterday evening when a major alert was triggered. A specialist team carries out a routine controlled explosion. This afternoon, work is ongoing. Forensic teams are near a shelter in West Princes Street Gardens where a brown cardboard box the size of a shoebox was discovered by park staff.
It was around 20 to 6 last night when the park ranger discovered the package. It was brought here to King's Stables Road by bomb disposal experts to dispose of.
There's been a visible police presence throughout the city centre all day, but officers stress there's no risk to the public.
It was not a bomb. The investigation is at a very early stage, but we already know that it was not a risk or a threat to the public. But the nature of that package was such that it clearly caused some concern.
Officers say they can't confirm the exact contents of the box, but say in the current climate where the terror threat is severe, they're treating the discovery seriously.
We're not ruling anything out. What we do know is that it was not a viable device. It could have been a hoax. You know, it could equally there could be a perfectly innocent explanation to this. It could have been someone's belongings that they've left behind carelessly that has caused a bit of anxiety.
With the investigation ongoing this evening, police ask for anyone with information to contact them. Lisa Summers reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
The former Scottish Labour leader Kezia Dugdale has revealed that she was paid £70,000 for appearing on the ITV show I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. The MSP has informed the Scottish Parliament of the payment, which has been placed on her public register of interests. Our reporter Stephen Godden is outside the Scottish Parliament for us tonight. Stephen.
Yes, Sally, it was November that Kezia Dugdale flew out to Australia to appear on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. She lasted 11 days in the jungle, during which time, like the other contestants, she performed a series of tasks. In her case, that included crawling through a tank of fish guts until, in the end, she was voted out by the public. Now today, thanks to the Parliament's Register of Interest, we've discovered how much she was paid for the trouble. There was that appearance fee you mentioned of £70,000. On top of that, she also declared additional expenses of between £10,000 and £15,000. Now after tax, that works out at a figure of around £45,000. Now from that sum, she donated just over £5,000 to 3 charities. That was on top of £2,500 she'd already donated from her MSP salary before she left for Australia. Now you'll remember that when she did leave, she did so without the permission of the Labour Party. There was strong criticism from some of her colleagues, suggestions she could be suspended from the party. But when she returned, her successor, Richard Leonard, gave her a formal reprimand, a written warning, but she was told she would face no further disciplinary action. Now today, Kezia Dugdale said she was glad that charities would benefit from her experience, but the Scottish Conservatives, they described her donation as a drop in the ocean, adding that the whole thing had been a shameful episode. It was certainly one of the stranger episodes that this Parliament has seen.
Thanks very much, Stephen Godden there. A sheriff has ruled that the death of a maintenance worker on the Queensferry crossing was a tragic accident. 62-year-old John Cousin was struck by the falling jib of a crane after he had removed a securing pin. The accident took place in April 2016 during the construction of the road bridge over the Forth. Sheriff William Gilchrist recommended that consideration be given to warning labels on similar pins regarding procedures for their removal. 4 men have been injured after being hit by a car which mounted the curb in St Andrews Town Centre. Police and other emergency services were called to Church Street just before midday. The 4 men received treatment at the scene for leg and back injuries before being taken to Ninewells Hospital. The road remains closed. 2 witnesses at the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry have disputed the allegations against staff at Smilam Park Orphanage in Lanark. One former resident said the claims of child abuse were absolute rubbish. A second said that Smilam Park staff dedicated themselves to the welfare of children. The inquiry has previously heard testimony about beatings and ill treatment at the home, which was closed in the 1980s. The Scottish Conservative leader Ruth Davidson has told BBC Scotland she doesn't want to face another referendum in her lifetime. In particular, she says the SNP should rule out any talk of a second referendum on Scottish independence. She was speaking in the third of our leader interviews this week to our political editor, Brian Taylor.
Referendums. Ruth Davidson was on the losing side over Brexit, but the winning side in the independence ballot. She doesn't fancy repeating either. In particular, she doesn't accept the SNP argument that Brexit could justify another independence referendum because Scotland voted to stay in the EU.
I believed, possibly that was my own folly, but I believed the SNP when they said that it was a once-in-a-generation decision. That's what they promised the people of Scotland, and it was a pretty clear result. We've seen in events since that 10 points is actually quite a healthy margin.
And they should stick to that promise in your view?
Well, it was a promise that they made to people when they were looking for their votes, and they shouldn't go back in it after.
Which would mean a referendum should not take place for at least 20, 25 years?
I would quite like to be out of politics completely by the time, if there ever is another one. In fact, I would never like another one at all. I've fought 2 referendums on the Constitution, one on Brexit and one on independence, and I think they divide countries and they divide people into tribes, these binary referendums, and I would be happy never to see another one in my lifetime.
Ruth Davidson repeatedly declined to say whether Downing Street would veto a further independence referendum using Westminster powers over the Constitution. Still, with Brexit, she's meeting the Prime Minister on Monday in an effort to broker a deal over the transfer of EU-devolved powers like agriculture. Turning to income tax, she says people in Scotland shouldn't pay more than in England and perhaps in future could pay less. And she cites an unexpected mentor.
And you know, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but the person that used to best understand this was Alex Salmond. He was the person that used to talk about cutting corporation tax. He was the person that used to talk about cutting air passenger duty. And it wasn't because he wanted cheaper flights, it's because he wanted, as First Minister, more money to spend on public services, because he knew, as I do, that encouraging the growth in the business side of Scotland is how you bring in more money to this country.
Would you ultimately therefore like to offer in Scotland a lower tax rate than that applying elsewhere in the UK?
I think the long-term aim should be to do that, but right now, let's try and grow our economy.
In response, Alex Salmond stresses he channelled the SNP towards progressive income tax while leader and firmly backs that approach now. The SNP also say Tory MSPs regularly urge more spending in areas like roads and health. But Ruth Davidson says, as First Minister, she'd trim waste, cut unwanted plans like named persons, and boost economic growth. Brian Taylor, Reporting Scotland.
You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's a little bit after 18 minutes to 7. A reminder of tonight's top story. Warnings that more planned operations could be cancelled as the flu outbreak continues. And still to come, the prolific artist who's launching a new exhibition of his work at the age of 91. The crew of a supply ship that was detained in Aberdeen for more than a year still hasn't been paid the wages owed to them. The Malavia 7 was first detained in June 2016 under merchant shipping regulations. The workers travelled home to India at the end of last year after 18 months stuck in the city's port without pay. Rebecca Curran reports.
This supply ship has become a familiar sight at Aberdeen Harbour since she was first detained in June 2016. Her former crew left the ship for the final time at the end of last year on the promise they would get the money owed to them, £670,000 in total. but they still haven't been paid.
So it's been tough so far, but we are just hopeful that someday it will all be over soon. It's just mental pressure now. Totally, that peaceful life is no more possible unless the wages are in my account.
We're here to sell the vessel if we can. All we need is a little bit of interest.
The ship failed to sell at a public auction ordered by Aberdeen Sheriff Court last October. It was eventually sold privately, but ongoing court proceedings mean the money hasn't been released.
A lot of people thought that once they went home, they would be coming home with money to pay bills, to pay loans and such like, and the money's not there. So they've got people knocking on their doors and pushing them all the time. And in fact, one of the guys has had to go out from his home and move up to Mumbai because he's scared that anything happens to him and his family.
The crew spent 18 months marooned on this ship with no money. The case will call again at court at the end of the month. The International Transport Workers Federation, which represents the crew, hope the money will be released then. The Malavia 7 has been renamed by her new Norwegian owners, but it will take more than a lick of paint to erase her legacy. Her former crew may now be thousands of miles away, but their struggle continues. Rebecca Curran, reporting Scotland, Aberdeen.
More than 3,500 new-style apprenticeship places have been announced for Scotland. They're designed to provide skills and workplace training for both senior school pupils and graduates. Here's our business correspondent, David Henderson.
They're starting young. These teenagers are earning while they're learning a new career. They've started as apprentices with Scottish Water, so part of their wage bill's met by the Scottish Government and from European social funds.
It's a very good course to take up. The amount of hands-on work that you get is really good, the experience, and any other company that's wanting to maybe employ you can see that experience that you've done and what you've achieved as well with the qualifications that you get out of it.
In Scotland, the number of modern apprenticeships is set to rise to more than 28,000 in the coming year, and among them 3,500 foundation and graduate roles for a wider range of people. Why? Because the way we work and Scotland's economy are changing fast. So young workers need to acquire complex new skills to meet the exact needs of their employers.
Young people now need to have a different set of skills and qualifications to help them succeed in the workplace. And all our apprenticeships are designed to make sure that these young people actually have skills, experience and the confidence and competence to actually succeed in the world and work much, much quicker.
Apprentices are not a new idea.
Apprenticeship right, Gerald Gwynn, a Glasgow boy.
They were helping build the QE2 liner on the Clyde back in the 1960s. Times have changed, but the focus remains on highly technical skills. But new options exist for a changing workforce. It's allowed Supta Das to develop computer apps while studying part-time.
Because of the background I'm from or the family responsibilities, I could never afford to leave my job and then do the full-time study. And this gives me ample opportunity to do my study, look after my family, but at the same time I can develop and enhance my own career. And this is really helping me a lot.
There'll be new funds to support apprenticeships in remote and rural parts of the country, all aimed at helping young workers and their employers thrive amid global competition. David Henderson, reporting Scotland.
This weekend sees the opening of a new exhibition by one of Scotland's most prolific artists. Now 91, Norman Gilbert has spent 7 decades making art, much of it featuring his wife, Pat. And it's Pat, who died 18 months ago, who's at the centre of his most personal project to date. Our arts correspondent, Pauline McLean, reports.
These are the works which will be at the centre of Norman Gilbert's latest exhibition in Newport-on-Tees.
Previous exhibitions have been called Plants, Patterns and People, and that pretty well covers it.
By people, he means his family, and in particular his wife Pat, who features in many of his paintings. They met as art students and were married for 65 years.
But they were all done during the last week that Pat was in hospital before she actually died.
18 months ago, when Pat suffered a stroke and doctors gave her just days to live, Norman sat by her bedside and sketched.
It was after I'd been there for 2 or 3 days. I thought, well, this would certainly give me something to do if I took my sketchbook and drew her. And one of the doctors came in and saw that I was drawing. And I said, it's all right, it keeps me sane. I have no regrets about doing the drawings. I love having them and I cherish them.
This is a sort of Gilbert family group that Norman didn't compose.
As well as helping Norman, the sketches helped his 4 sons, now grown and living around the world, to share those intimate final moments. And for one of them, also an artist, they offered a chance to widen the discussion about dementia and end-of-life care.
The drawings are already being used as a means of engagement between physicians and doctors and so on, to kind of have discussions that otherwise wouldn't happen, you know, about difficult issues about end-of-life care, especially for those living with Alzheimer's and dementia. But I mean, physicians over here in Canada look at the drawings and they just say that there's such a vivid, authentic depiction of somebody in the last days of their life.
The family now hope the sketches can be exhibited as artworks in their own right, a personal moment for them, but one many will be familiar with. And for Norman, Pat will be forever at the heart of all his work.
Pat said that she liked me painting the children because it gave them a sort of immortality. And I think that I might be doing something like that with her if these drawings go on.
Pauline McLean, reporting Scotland.
So, you're preparing for the Commonwealth Games in Australia's Gold Coast, but you can't train because of the weather. That was the dilemma facing Scotland's beach volley team. But in less than 48 hours, their problems were solved, as Jane Lewis explains.
Portobello Beach and the dog walkers are out in force. And until recently, it's also where you'd find Scotland's beach volleyball players honing their skills.
But the beach in winter doesn't exactly make for ideal training conditions. During the recent chilly snap we had, this sand here was packed hard. Today it's really damp and it's really heavy, as you can see. Now, it's not exactly uncomfortable temperature-wise here, and it's not overly windy either, but of course that can all change. As you can see, the posts that normally hold the volleyball nets are here, but the people who normally train here have had to make alternative arrangements.
120 tonnes of sand later, problem solved, and a transformation was underway from empty barn to a beach volleyball court, minus the elements.
We've got amazing quality of sand here. We've got the light for us to be able to guarantee our training. Means that we will be in the best shape we can possibly be in. And I think this is going to be the difference between us just going out there to compete and winning a medal when we get out there.
The work that went on behind the scenes was huge, and then this has taken us, we've managed to turn this around with the help of the farmers, with the tractors. About 48 hours we've been hard at it. So these last little flakes of sand that we're moving around, this is the last 10-minute job before we let the Commonwealth athletes kind of get on there.
And it was all hands on deck to complete the conversion. Job done, and now the hard work starts for the athletes.
They've been training out in the hard sands of Portobello now all last winter and this winter. It's not just been this winter. And I thought I'd just be kind and give them a wee bit that had no wind or rain. I could have been nicer, sent them away, but we decided that we're going to toughen them up, so they're ready for the Gold Coast.
Ready for the Gold Coast thanks to this transformation from empty farmyard barn to ideal training needs. Jane Lewis, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Now let's get the weekend weather outlook from Kirsty.
Thank you very much, Sally. Good evening to you. This picture from one of our weather watchers in Helensburgh sums up today's weather quite nicely. A lot of cloud around, although some brighter and sunnier moments at times too. This evening and tonight, dry is how it stays for most of us, with a lot of cloud around. That cloud thick enough to produce the odd spot of drizzle through the northeast and the Northern Isles. Some light and patchy rain also reaching the Western Isles come the end of the night. A breezy night, tonight, particularly so around coastal areas, the winds touching gale force at times across the Western and Northern Isles. With the cloud and the breeze, however, temperatures will stay well above freezing for most of us. Clear spells, though, across the Northwest Highlands, perhaps the Murray area allowing a touch of frost to develop. So into tomorrow, and again a lot of dry weather in the forecast. Again, though, a good deal of cloud with some light and patchy rain spilling in through much of the west coast as we go through the course of the day. So tomorrow afternoon in more detail, I think dry across much of the southeast, albeit cloudy. Some patchy rain for the likes of Galloway, Ayrshire, perhaps the Glasgow area, Argyll, and through the Western Isles tomorrow afternoon. Again, strong to gale force winds here. A similar story through the Northern Isles. Brightness and sunshine certainly very limited tomorrow afternoon. I think the best of it around the North Highlands towards Murray, and temperatures will peak around 7 or 8 Celsius. For hill walking and climbing tomorrow, the very best of the conditions likely around the Northwest Highlands, bright with perhaps some sunshine. Some sleet showers to come through the Cullen Hills and the Trossachs. Winds from the south or southeast around 25 to 45 miles per hour with significant wind chill on the tops. And for the more eastern ranges, a lot of dry weather, though a lot of cloud around too. 25 to 35 miles per hour winds from the south or southeast again that significant wind chill. And for skiing this weekend, well, reasonable snow cover. It will be fairly windy on the pistes, however, with strong south to southeasterly winds. Tomorrow evening, and I think there will be further rain to come across the west and through central areas. Most of it, though, will be light and patchy. And then Sunday, a going downhill type of day. Some heavy rain spilling in from the northwest during the course of the day, accompanied by strong to gale force southerly winds, indeed severe gales perhaps for a time across the very far north. For the beginning of next week, a significant change coming, a blast of cold air feeding across the country. Brisk northwesterly winds bringing a number of showers which will turn wintry into Monday night. That's the forecast. Sally.
Thanks very much, Kirstine. Now, a reminder of tonight's main news. More than 300 planned operations were cancelled in the last week, and there are warnings that more could be postponed as the flu outbreak continues. President Trump's visit to Britain next month is off. He had been due to attend the official opening of the new US Embassy in South London, but he tweeted that he was not a big fan of the embassy and blamed Barack Obama's administration for a bad deal. And that's Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with the headlines at 8 and the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, have a very good evening. Bye-bye.